My name is James Douglas and welcome to my presentation, The Sidestep. In this presentation I will look at the movement during a sidestep of an East Rugby Club first grade player. The two movements I will talk about are the planned sidestep, in which he knows which way he's going before stepping, and the unplanned sidestep, in which he doesn't know what way he's going before the step occurs. I will then compare and contrast whilst referencing appropriate literature, talk about performance criteria and correct technique errors and what possibly causes these errors, and then some suggested interventions to help make improvements if necessary. But first, let's see what happens when you perfect the sidestep. The sidestep or cut can be broken up into three phases: the run-up, the initial contact phase, and the acceleration phase. All have an impact on performance and injury prevention and will be talked about throughout this presentation. But first, let's have a look at Jackson's sidesteps. A sidestep can be broken into two categories: the ability to beat a defender using agility and speed, and also the ability to complete a sidestep or cut without injury. Agility has then been defined as a rapid whole body movement with a change of velocity or direction in response to a stimulus. Technique, speed, and leg muscle qualities all contribute to improved agility or change of direction performance. A number of injuries can occur during the sidestep movement. However, one of the most common is injuries to the anterior cruciate ligament or the ACL. It has been found that injuries during the sidestep are not uncommon in sport, especially to the ACL, due to the need of quick adjustments to get past the defender. At initial contact, an abducted hip, extended knee joint, externally rotated foot, and laterally flexed and rotated torso all contribute to ACL injuries while stepping. It has been found that most ACL injuries occur with most or all of the weight being shifted to a single foot, such as what happens during the sidestep. ACL injury usually occurs when the upper leg rotates whilst the foot and lower leg are planted. It has also been found that knee abduction angles are a major predictor of ACL injuries. Breaking Jackson's sidestep up, the first thing we'll look at is the run-up or the speed of the run-up. And this is from the initial foot contact with the ground during the run-up to the initial foot contact with the ground during the sidestep. As you can see, his planned sidestep took a time of 1.034 seconds, whereas unplanned sidestep took a time of 1.635 seconds, showing that his unplanned sidestep time approach was slower. His slower approach speed during his unplanned step allows him to make a decision at the last second. However, it will negatively affect his performance. There are a few limitations with this. As you can see, Jackson's approach is from a slightly different position between his planned and unplanned sidestep. However, you can already see from the initial ground contact phase between his planned and unplanned sidestep and his planned step, where he knows what way he's going, he's already in a powerful position accelerating forward, where in his unplanned sidestep, his first contact is slow and he's more upright as he's unaware of what way he's going to go. A slower approach speed allows us to assume that Jackson's ground reaction force would be lower than that of a planned step. Ground reaction force relates to Newton's third law: for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Ground reaction force is usually influenced by speed, among other things, and is usually measured using a force plate. Unfortunately, in this situation, I did not have a force plate, but due to a slower approach speed, we can assume that Jackson had a higher ground reaction force during his planned step than his unplanned step, and a higher ground reaction force is going to lead to an increase in performance and likelihood of beating his defender. A comparison between the base of support between the planned and unplanned sidestep shows approximately a difference of 21 centimeters. This is due to the fact that when Jackson planned to step, he knew which leg would become his support leg, and his back foot was already in a position to continue running. However, when he performed an unplanned step, he was unaware of which direction he was going. He stayed more square on, widening his base of support, allowing him to be able to step in both directions. Even though he's giving himself the option to step both ways, he's not giving himself the opportunity to advance forward or accelerate out of the step. unplanned step, Jackson's trail foot alignment is not in a position to take a positive step forward. This means that his next step will be slower, and it puts the knee in a more vulnerable position by having to accept more force than when the back foot is in a good alignment position. There is again some limitations. The trail foot and the knee flexion of the leg behind is hard to measure in the frontal plane view, meaning you have to make a judgment based on the visual images that you can see in front of you. This can be shown by the next slide. As his known next step distance is much closer to his original support foot on his planned step compared to that of his unplanned side step. This will directly impact performance and the ability to beat a defender. Going back to his trail leg in the planned step, his trail leg is already somewhat preloaded and in a position to take the weight of his body in the next step. This, however, is not seen in the unplanned side step. By having his trail leg preloaded, it will help apply more force into the ground, which will help the change of direction and thus help acceleration off. This will also allow for a decrease of ground reaction time and increase in stride length, which all contribute to an increase in performance. During Jackson's initial contact in his planned step, there is less frontal plane knee valgum than that of the unplanned step. His planned step has a knee abduction valgus of 0.6 degrees, as you can see by the picture, whereas his unplanned step has a knee abduction angle of 10 degrees. This has a direct link to injury that I will go over in a few minutes. A comparison between his planned and unplanned side step, you can also see there is a difference in distance from the support leg and the midline of his body. In his planned step, his support leg is closer to the midline of his body, where in his unplanned step shows that his support leg is further outside the body. This will have an impact on performance and accelerating out of the step, but also could contribute towards injury. It has been found that significantly higher knee abduction moments occur in wider cuts, which has a direct relation to increase of injury, particularly to the ACL. As you see in Jackson's unplanned step, his cut is wider, which is increasing his chance of injury. When looking at improving cut performance, it has been proposed that leg muscles qualities such as strength, power, and reactive strength are important determinants of change of direction ability. So working on these aspects via strength and conditioning program is the first step to helping Jackson improve his side step. It has also been found that by lowering the body's center of mass and powerfully kicking the ground with faster hip extension motion before ground contact is important for implementing fast and quick lateral cutting maneuvers that will allow for receiving larger ground reaction force. This, accompanied by maximum hip extension speed out of the step, is allowed for greater performance in the side step and cutting abilities. It has been found that lateral pelvic tilt, meaning the tilt of the hip on the opposite side of the leg pushing against the ground, was one of the factors that caused a decrease in performance during the side step movement. This accompanied by trunk rotation, and has been found that athletes who could turn their trunk in the direction they intend to step experience faster times in both planned and unplanned scenarios. It has also been found that lower extremity muscle activation during cutting may be different between pre-planned and unanticipated cuts. Thus, some neuromuscular training or muscle activation strategies would also allow for improvement of performance during the side step. Drills that require planned and unplanned steps are also ideal for improving performance. This would allow for more game-like situation, which would only have a positive impact on performance. And finally, practice. Improving running and cutting mechanics implemented under supervision will also be able to increase performance. During match play, the need for speed and direction changes is dictated by the playing situation, including factors such as position of the ball, opponents, teammates, and the type of play. This could all have an influence on injury occurring. Sidestep cutting technique can be changed with training. It has been found that by reducing dynamic valgus, placing the foot closer to the center of mass, and landing on their toes, athletes are likely to reduce the knee abduction moment substantially and thus decrease the likelihood of injury. This then leads on to implementing an ACL injury prevention plan, where toe landings, narrow cuts, and low-key valgus should be the focus of this intervention. Unanticipated cutting movements may prove to be an important component of neuromuscular training and injury prevention. Prevention programs whereby enhancing muscle recruitment and reaction times may provide greater and earlier muscle pre-contraction that would allow appropriate kinematic adjustments to reduce ACL loads. It has been found that individual strategies including plyometric, perturbation, and skill training, as well as traditional proprioceptive training, all influence a decrease in injury during the cutting or sidestep phase. They have also been found that working on practicing specific technique factors involved in performing sports actions lead to a decrease in ACL loading and decrease in risk of injuries. Koga et al. Found that ACL injuries are likely to occur within the first 40 milliseconds of the contact phase, meaning technique training that reduces knee valgus motion and abduction loading during the early landing phase should be emphasized by all injury prevention programs. For Jackson, there's a few focal points that I want him to focus on. The first one will be keeping his foot closer to the midline of the body. By keeping his foot closer to the midline, this will allow for greater hip extension and thus more power and acceleration to propel the body forward in the opposite direction, allowing for an increase in performance. It will also allow for his torso to stay more upright and a decrease in knee valgus angle. This means that there is less likelihood that he will get hurt or injury to the ACL during the side step. By keeping his foot close to the midline of the body, this will also allow for greater recovery time and shorter time between ground contact, meaning before your opponent has a chance to adjust to make the tackle, Jackson has already passed them and is heading down the field. Another aspect I want Jackson to focus on is keeping his shoulder leg preloaded and his knee in a slightly flexed angle behind but still underneath his hip. This will allow him to decrease ground reaction time and increase stride length, which will also have a positive effect on performance and allow Jackson a greater chance to beat his opponent during a side step. Getting Jackson to participate in strength and conditioning programs, neuromuscular training, and supervised planned and unplanned agility drills are only going to have a positive effect. They're going to increase performance and they're going to decrease the likelihood of injury, especially to the ACL. Thank you for watching my presentation on the human movement analysis between a planned and unplanned side step. I hope you enjoyed.